How long can a tenant live on a property without paying?
What the landlords do is they wait until the arrears accrue significantly enough where the tenant can't afford to pay that back.
Can a landlord evict you without going to a court?
টাকাটা তো না দিয়ে চলে যায় ম্যাক্সিমাম ল্যান্ডলর্ড ইউজুয়ালি বদার করে না
How long can a tenant live on a property without paying?
Technically, you can live there for a long time. It's up to the landlord to actually bring the action. The landlord has a bit of a catch-22 situation here, because if first of all, you need to serve the demands in rent. So you need to serve a 14-day demand that rent is due, and you need to pay the rent by X amount of date, or we will start an eviction action against you. However, 1 month or 2 months, you're going to pay an attorney and go into court, and then it's a very easy thing to settle. As soon as the tenant pays that back, well, then your case is dismissed because you no longer have an arrears
situation.
Rent.
Right.
So what the landlords do is they wait until the arrears accrue significantly enough where the tenant can't afford to pay that back, and so then what they do is they get a judgment. But that doesn't mean that the tenant can't fight it and can't drag it out, and conceivably drag out a case for a year and a half, even.
Okay. How many notice a landlord has to serve before actually taking steps for eviction?
Well, it depends on the type of eviction. So if it's a holdover proceeding, say you're a monthly tenant. Let's say you don't have a lease and you're in a market rate apartment and you're just paying rent every month, and the landlord decides, you know what, for whatever reason, I'm terminating your lease. Depending on the amount of time that you've been in the apartment, will determine the length of the notice. So if it's a year or less, then it's only a 30-day notice of termination, meaning that by the end of this month, let me clarify that. So they have to serve the notice within a month, and then they get the succeeding month, the entire month, in order to vacate. If it's between 1 year and 2 years, it's a 60-day notice. Anything above 2 years is a 90-day notice. So now, conceivably, if a person's been in an apartment for 3 or 4 years and you want to do a holdover, you have to wait more than 90 days just before you're able to actually start the eviction. So you need to serve a notice of termination. And then once that notice is ignored and the party doesn't vacate and he's in the premises without your permission, then you go and you start a holdover proceeding.
Can a landlord evict you without going to a court?
Nope. The only way the landlord can evict you without going to court is if there's a vacate order from the Department of Buildings. So let's say it's an illegal basement apartment and you have a lot of those. The landlords not only are not allowed to rent those, but they're not allowed to collect rent on them. And you can stop paying that, and maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but the point is that if the Department of Buildings finds out that this apartment is occupied and it qualifies as what they call an R3, which is the classification under the multiple dwelling law of say of a 1 or a 2 family home, and you have a basement apartment that you're not allowed, that doesn't meet the code and you're not allowed to be renting, they could put a vacate order on that and say, well, this apartment is not fit for human habitation, and refuse to allow you back in. But that's in very extreme and rare circumstances. The fact of the matter is that the landlord must get a court order in order to evict you, and then even after they get the order to evict, the court not only has to issue the order, the warrant of eviction, but has to sign off on the execution of the warrant of eviction, meaning it could be stayed, or it's stayed for a specific amount of time, or it could be stayed indefinitely, or it's allowed to be executed immediately, which then means the requisition has to go to the marshal, and the marshal then has an entire process that the marshal needs to follow in order to get the court to sign off on service of the notice of eviction.
Attorney Sheikh Salim.
No, ঠিকই আছে, বলছে কি যে সমস্ত বাড়িতে ধরেন ইলিগাল অ্যাপার্টমেন্ট আছে, সেখানতে ল্যান্ডলর্ড রেন্ট কালেক্ট করতে পারে না। পারে না। আর বলছে যে এর আগে বলছে যে টার্ম অফ দ্য লিজের উপরে নির্ভর করে কত দিনের লিজ। 4 ইয়ার্স হলে 90 ডেজ, 2 ইয়ার্স এর বেশি হলে 60 ডেজ, ওয়ান্স লেস দেন 1 ইয়ার হলে 30 ডেজ নোটিশ দিতে হবে। এর ভিতরে যদি তারা চলে যায় তাহলে চলে যাইতে পারে। আর যদি তখন তো আর ল্যান্ডলর্ড টাকা পাচ্ছে নাই 60-90 ডেজের ভিতরে, স্টিল শি রিমেইনস অব্লিগেবল ওই যে ইয়েটা, কিন্তু টাকাটা তো না দিয়ে চলে যায় ম্যাক্সিমাম। ল্যান্ডলর্ড ইউজুয়ালি বদার করে না। আর বলছে যে যদি ধরেন ইল্লিগাল বেসমেন্ট থাকে, ইল্লিগাল অ্যাপার্টমেন্ট থাকে, সেখান থেকে আইনি নাই রেন্ট কালেক্ট করার বা ওই লিগালি যে রেন্ট কালেক্ট করতে পারে না। তো তারপরে আবার রেন্ট ইন্টায়ার প্রসিজার হচ্ছে কেন কি, যে ল্যান্ডলর্ড টেনান্টে আপনি জাজমেন্ট পাইলেন, ওকে জাজমেন্টের ইভিকশনটা পাইলেন, কিন্তু এইটা আবার মার্শালের কাছে যাবে। মার্শালের কাছে গেলে মার্শালের আবার একটা প্রসেস, তারা অ্যাকচুয়াল ওয়ারেন্ট অফ ইভিকশন নেবে, ওয়ারেন্ট, সেইটা নিয়ে তারা এক্সিকিউট করে তাদের বাইর করে দিতে পারে। এই আলো প্রসিজার আর কি এইটা।
One last question on this one. We didn't touch on something which is prenup. I'm going to go there later.
That's fine.
What is an actual process for a landlord to proceed with eviction?
Depending on the type of eviction. So after you serve the requisite notices, and that's really important, because if you don't serve the requisite notice, if you don't serve it properly, if the content of the notice doesn't comply with the law, if you don't clearly state the section of the law that you're seeking eviction, if you don't state that you intend to evict at the culmination of this period of time, if you either don't pay the rent or if you don't vacate by a certain date. So if the notice has any defects in it, your case is done, which means that you'll have to reserve the notice and you'll have to refile. If the notices are served properly and the content of the notice is proper, then what you do is you go and you file a notice of petition and petition with the court. Now that has to be served, so the court will actually assign an appearance date, so the first date that you're supposed to appear in court, and then service is supposed to occur no more than 17 days before the court appearance, and no less than 12 days. I know I'm getting into the weeds, but it's time, and it all factors in. So, and the timing has to be precise in order for your case to be valid. So then once you do that, and then you get into court, then you have an entire other procedure once you're in court about how to navigate and litigate this case.
Okay.
নিউইয়র্ক থেকে সম্প্রচারিত TBN 24 টেলিভিশন, বিশ্বজুড়ে বাঙালির কণ্ঠস্বর।